This is a parent's worst nightmare. Your child drops to the ground and you don't know why. Well, in some cases, it can be a heart problem called long QT syndrome. Our health specialist Leah Sarich with what the disorder of the heart is and one family's experience here in Calgary.
Yeah, this is an incredible story. So this could actually be the case. You know, you hear those stories that there's an athlete, they're on the field, and all of a sudden they drop to the ground. Well, that could be what's happening here. Then you often hear later that that athlete had some kind of congenital heart defect. So that, in fact, can be long QT syndrome. So it's an electrical disorder of the heart that occurs in otherwise healthy people, often athletes. It can be a genetic abnormality. It can also be caused by certain medications that actually disrupt the electricity in the heart. So I want to introduce you to a fellow called Curtis Rosano. He's 23 years old now, but when he was 14, he was doing a drill at basketball practice. There he is there, and he collapsed. His dad happened to be the basketball coach, rushed to his side to try to revive him, but he couldn't because his little 14-year-old heart had suddenly stopped beating. So his dad did CPR. He had someone call 911. Thankfully, they had an AED, a defibrillator, and they shocked him a couple of times. The paramedics arrived. They defibrillated him 10 more times. Finally, at the Alberta Children's Hospital, Curtis was put into a medically induced coma for 10 days just to let his body and brain recover. His parents were warned he could have brain damage, not be able to walk, but thankfully Curtis was very lucky and he fully recovered. So this is an incredible story. And since that event, he has had a device in his chest. It acts both as a pacemaker and a defibrillator, and it's just implanted in his chest, and it will shock him whenever he needs it. In fact, it just shocked him this past spring. He was shocked twice by his ICD while he was working out.
It's a little bit always in your mind, especially when you're doing athletics. You're always thinking, well, what happens, especially now that I've been shocked, I always think, maybe what happens if I get my heart rate too high again and I get shocked? Well, like Exner said, Dr. Exner said, he's like, you know, it's gonna shock you regardless. He's like, just, you know what it's like already. So he's like, it can't be any worse than that. And so, yeah, but it's just nice to know that if something happens like that again, the ICD will work. But yeah, it's always in the back of my mind when I work out, especially.
Can you imagine living with that? I can feel it right there. That's my hand. That's me feeling the pacemaker, the ICD, right under his chest right there. It's not very big, but what it's doing is keeping him alive, certainly. So because long QT syndrome is a genetic disorder, several of Curtis' family members have been screened. Nothing has conclusively come up just yet, so none of them also have a device implanted just yet. But it is very useful to have the family sit down and discuss their potential risk because it does have this genetic component. And in fact, many heart disorders have a genetic component. So it is really useful to sit down and have this conversation with your family. And one cardiologist that I spoke to said getting that family history can in fact be life-saving, certainly. And even if it's not life-saving, it can certainly get the tests that you might need to understand your risk.
You have to look at your family tree and your pedigree and sort of say, oh, okay, is there a family history of long QT or a family history of epilepsy or a family history of recurrent pass-out spells? And then you'd go to your doctor and get an ECG done. And an ECG is not 100% predictive. You know, there's nothing that is predictive. These are just determinants. They sort of say, well, you know, this gives you a certain risk profile. So you go, but an ECG is so simple. It doesn't cost very much, and it's very useful.
And it has no side effects, so often a very useful test. So Dr. Duff and the Heart and Stroke Foundation really encourage people to sit down and discuss their family history. And they say, you know, now is a really good time to do that. We're approaching the holidays. Often families are getting together that haven't been together for a while. This is a great time to sit down and discuss these risks, these symptoms. You know, have you passed out lately? Is this something you're dealing with? Good to have these conversations. And then it's also good to take those conversations and relay them back to your family doctor to find out if, in fact, genetic screening might be something useful for you.
Fascinating stuff.
Fascinating, absolutely.
More on your blog.
More on my blog as always.
Breakfasttelevision.ca. And time to check in with our Craig Larkins, who is making chocolate this morning.